Hey, Senior Man here from One More Day. Wanted to welcome everybody to this edition of Virginia Beach Frontline Firefighter.
Coming up on this month's edition of Virginia Beach Frontline Firefighter. We'll revisit a video from 2008 which covers information you should know about hoarding and review the procedures for dealing with this increasing problem. Next, Master Firefighter Mike Kelleher shows us tips when selecting purchase points on a vehicle during vehicle extrication in this month's Tech Rescue Minute. Master Firefighter Rory Hoyleman takes us back to the wild side as he familiarizes us with some common lizards we might encounter on calls and how to handle them. Next, our BBFD mechanic David Stites reviews the proper starting procedure for a steel chainsaw. I'm Master Firefighter Tom Parks. Here's the host of Virginia Beach Frontline Firefighter, Master Firefighter Chris Stockhouse.
Thanks, Tom. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this edition of Frontline. On today's program, we're coming to you from the 2013 9/11 Heroes Run at the Virginia Beach Sportsplex. We're all here supporting this race to honor our fallen and all first responders. Today's program starts off with a simple question. Have you ever responded to a call and discovered a secondary problem? In 2008, the Virginia Beach Fire Department produced a short training video on hoarding with then Battalion and now Deputy Chief David Hutchison.
Hi, I'm Battalion Chief David Hutchison with the Virginia Beach Fire Department. Today I'd like to talk to you some about hoarding.
In 2006, due to an unfortunate event involving a tragic fire, the City of Virginia Beach established the Hoarding Support Services Team in an effort to address the needs of individuals at risk in the community from hoarding behaviors. A definition for hoarding is the excessive collection and retention of things or animals until they interfere with day-to-day functions, such as home, health, family, work, and social life, which in severe cases causes safety and health hazards. It is estimated that older adults represent a significant number of people that hoard. Hoarding behavior is seen in various illnesses and therefore difficult to place in any one diagnostic category. Intervention without cooperation can lead to the development of other dangerous behaviors. Careful assessment of each situation is essential for a successful outcome.
Research has shown that to be effective, intervention needs to be collaborative. This effort needs to include the adult, family and other agencies, code enforcement, animal control, and emergency response personnel.
It is important to note that the team's goal is to aid citizens. A key point to remember is, provided there is no criminal, civil, and building code infraction, the citizen has every right to refuse intervention. Resolving the hoarding behaviors reduces risk to the individual, to surrounding households, and to first responders who may be called to the home for a fire, EMS, police, or code enforcement response. This video will outline the flow chart for addressing a hoarding case.
Additionally, this video will help first responders and concerned citizens identify hoarding behaviors.
This is Officer Dolly Deans. How can I help you?
Master Police Officer Dolly Deans will share with us the police procedures required in such cases.
Majority of the officers are responding to something entirely different. Maybe domestic, maybe something involving a medical issue, and they arrive on the scene, and when they arrive and the door opens, and then you see. Normally most households will say, oh, the homeowner will say something like this, excuse the mess. But clearly when you walk into the home, you're going to see something over the top as far as the clutter or the mess. And usually you're going to start walking in the house, and it's literally a pathway to walk through, and where there's mounds of whatever, laundry or whatever it happens to be. It is important when an officer arrives on the scene and you're able to determine that there is a hoarding case, you need to contact Adult Protective Services. Most importantly, if there's any form of hazards to the family living in that home, you must make the call immediately.
Hoarding presents a unique hazard to both fire and EMS personnel.
In May of 2006, fire crews were dispatched to a house fire where 2 elderly citizens lived. There was excessive hoarding, and unfortunately both occupants perished in the event. Caseworker Carrie Raleigh interviewed a citizen whose collection of items has grown over a number of years.
This particular gentleman, as far as is not your typical hoarding client. He has virtually no friends because he feels that he cannot include them in his entire life. He can only talk to people outside of his neighborhood or his home.
I don't want to victimize myself. I've done this to myself. I will say that if my sister can't come in the house, and she's frankly quite angry with me because she couldn't stay in my house, but I'm not a victim. I'm actually the one that caused it. So a victim, I think, is somebody that wants to feel that somebody else did something to them.
He goes out to dinner almost every day because he has unplugged his stove for safety purposes. He will use his microwave for microwave dinners. Otherwise, he does takeout or goes out to a restaurant to eat.
Animal control works to balance health, safety, and welfare needs of the people and animals in our city. Animal control officers must be mindful that while hoarding items like televisions, antiques, and other personal effects are related to one type of hoarding,
The hoarding of animals is a very serious problem.
from the Code Enforcement Office, Lynn Roundtree explains what steps should be taken when a possible hoarding case is at hand.
Well, I think we mainly look for life safety type issues. Whether a person could easily get outside of a structure if something was to happen, a fire or any other type of incident. Whether they could get to a window, whether they could get to a door, whether they have passage from one room to another. Whether the items that are in there are life treasures or they're just stacks of old newspapers, other type of combustible materials that if a fireman had to go in there would increase the flame spread or hinder their operation of rescuing someone or putting a fire out.
So what do you do as a Virginia Beach first responder in dealing with hoarding situations?
As a member of the Virginia Beach Emergency Response System, we are considered mandated reporters. The state of Virginia requires we report any and all incidents where abuse, neglect, or exploitation is observed. In some instances, hoarding is a form of self-neglect. There are 3 key components you should complete when hoarding or self-neglect is observed. First, make a visual assessment of the living conditions. Check for reasonable and safe access to main points of entrance and exit. Next, make a mental comparison to the hoarding example seen here. Determine what level of hoarding exists. Then, follow the hoarding notification flowchart. At your first opportunity, be certain to contact the fire marshal's office via email. The email should contain the residential address and the level of hoarding found. Also, annotate your incident report to reflect the potential hoarding hazards. The fire marshal's office will notify dispatch and have them add comments to the CAD, alerting future first responders of potential hazards due to hoarding. These notes may be your first line of defense when responding to this address in the future. With your help, we can provide the best proactive care possible for our citizens. This is everyone's responsibility. It's just another way we ensure everyone goes home safe.
For this month's Tech Rescue Minute, we head over to the training center with Master Firefighter Mike Callagher, who will review key tips to remember when making purchase points during vehicle extrications.
On this edition of Tech Rescue Minute, we're going to review making a purchase point on a vehicle if one's not already there. All right, when we look at a car and we get on scene, sometimes there's not a purchase point here. Maybe the car was caved in and it's flush. You can't get a purchase point. We're going to review a couple ways you can do that. You don't always have to take it from the pin side. You could go up and do it from the hinge side as well. But we're going to show you a couple techniques, and I'm going to get Sean in here. We're going to go ahead and show you a couple of them that we do. One of them is the crush. You can crush this in. Got to be careful of the patient, right? You can crush it in and makes a nice purchase point there, and then just get your tips in and kind of peel it back. What we're going to show you today is the vertical crush, starting from the top and working down. As you can see, he's putting the spreader in there. What he's trying to do is he's trying to make that force, taking the spreading force and then forcing that door out and away, not in, all right? He's gonna go ahead and do that. As you can see, that's all it took. Now he's got a point in here, all right? We haven't forced the door all the way open by doing this. What we've done is, all we've done is trying to create an opening here to get our spreaders in, all right? That's all we're trying to do. And you can stop right there and move on to the front. You can also do this technique on the front by the A-post, all right? So Sean's gonna demonstrate that. We had to do it from the front because like we talked about, you don't always have to go from the pin side. You can go over and also do it from the hinge side as well. All you're doing is you're trying to get enough in here where you can get the spreader tips in and maybe peel this back. That's all you're trying to do. Be able to create that purchase point, to be able to get in there and spread. Another one we talked about is the squeeze technique. This works well. You'll see here now that he's going to do it. It's just kind of squeezing the door apart. And what it does is it pulls that metal in, and that creates your void right here that you can get your spreader tips in. Okay, we're going to go ahead and take the rest of the door. We've had a couple problems with our cutters coming back with some damage. We're going to go ahead and show you a couple techniques that we found that'll prevent that from happening. Open the door, just keep making little bites, get in there, and then once you get a nice bite, just let it go. Another technique a lot of people don't use is to be able to put something behind that door to capture it when it opens. You know, just take a piece of webbing. Right now we don't have anybody in the way, so we're just going to let the door open. Not all cars are the same. Some of them can be a little more challenging. I think it's a simple opening, and sometimes it can be quite challenging. It depends on how good the metal's welded, and sometimes it starts to rip. So you can see the door's open. What we're seeing are people trying to use the cutters to cut these hinges, and that's a good technique. But what we're finding is we're not using the tips the way they should be. We're just using the very ends of the tips. As you can see, if I try to get this cutter up in there, it's very hard to get in there. Now I can maneuver, I'm a little bit in the way, but it's not going to get in there. So a better technique would be is once you open the door with the spreaders, is just to come right in here and roll with the spreaders right in here. And just spread it apart a little bit. If you want to cut it, you can afterwards, but get it open a little bit more so you can get the cutters in there. Okay? There's nothing wrong with spreading this door and using the spreaders to remove the door. We're seeing a lot of damage with the cutters on the tips for people just trying to get in there and make those cuts, and we're trying to eliminate that. So try to get that spreader in there, get them open a little bit more, and then get down in there with the cutters and cut. Finish it up. The way the door will come down creates more of an opening now. You can get the cutter in there. Don't forget to cut your wire. Maintaining control of the door. Nice work, fellas. Nice work, nice work. As you can see, there was just a couple techniques we showed you. There's other ones out there. You can use the Halligan to pry open, get a little purchase point. You can do different things. Everybody has a little bit different technique. We just wanted to show you a little review on some of the things that we use. If you have any questions, give me a call at Company 10B. I'll be more than happy to answer them. Just remember to stabilize your vehicle, make sure the patient is secure, is safe. You have patient packaging taken care of and the patient's getting tended to. Make sure you have a charged line on the ground. And also make sure you disconnect the battery for the vehicle. We're seeing that a lot. A lot of people are skipping over that. Don't get in a hurry and stay safe.
Last month, he showed us snakes. This month, he returns with lizards. Master Firefighter Rory Hoyleman takes us back to Animal Jungle and familiarizes us with common pet lizards we may encounter on calls in his latest edition of The Wild Side.
Welcome to this edition of The Wild Side. We're here at Animal Jungle today with my buddy Alex, an Asian water monitor. Last month we talked about snakes. This month we're going to talk about lizards you might find in people's homes. One of the most common lizards you'll find in people's homes nowadays as pets is what we call a bearded dragon. They're native to Australia. They'll get a little bit bigger than this, but this is about as full grown as they get. As you can see, they're fairly docile. Lots of people like to just put them on their shirt like this and walk around with them. They eat all kinds of crickets and little bugs, but again, for the most part, they're very docile. They can bite you, And the other thing is, they have very sharp claws that help them climb. When these guys do get aggressive, what they'll do is they'll puff up their beard, hence the name bearded dragon, and it'll turn black, especially the males, and they'll puff it up, and they may open their mouth and their posturing to blow themselves up to make them look bigger than they are. That's the signs of aggression that these guys will show you. Okay, as you see, this is what they look like as babies. These guys are about a year old. They're pretty much harmless, just like the adults. The more you handle them, the easier they become. And since they are people's pets, they are handled a lot, which as when they grow into adults, they become very docile. But again, they can bite you if they feel like they're threatened. And again, they're relatively inexpensive, so that's why you see them in a lot of people's homes nowadays. Another popular lizard that people have as pets in their homes is what we call a leopard gecko. And this one's a baby. This is only about a year old or a little less. And they come in many different colors or morphs, which make them popular because you can get different varieties of them. They are one of the, besides the bearded dragon, probably the next more common pet lizard people have as pets. Full grown, they can reach up to about 8 inches maybe at the max. The only threatening posture they do is just open their mouth and kind of puff up like the bearded dragons do. Again, mostly docile and harmless, but they can bite you. It's more of like a pinch. At this small size, you probably wouldn't even feel it if it did bite you. The giant gecko, they're not as common as the bearded dragons or the leopard geckos, probably because they're not as handleable. These guys can climb walls and ceilings, so they're not an animal that you can sit there and really hold and enjoy. People have them more of like as a pet just to look at. They don't really handle them at all. They're very fast, and as you can see the one in the back, how he's sticking against the wall of the cage. So that's why they do not make very good pets, because you just can't handle them at all. One in the back there, as you can see, like I said, they can climb on the wall. They almost have like suction cups on their fingertips that allow them to climb ceilings and walls. That's why they don't make good pets. They're very hard to handle. This next guy here, this is a veiled chameleon. They're not as popular as pets, chameleons, but they are growing in popularity, partly because they stress out very easily. This is for more the more experienced reptile owner to own. They do have that long tongue that they like to shoot out and grab their insects with in the wild. They can change colors, as people have seen on TV or in commercials. Their only posturing is they puff up, they turn different colors, and they'll have their mouth open and be hissing if they feel threatened. Now we're going to talk about some of the larger lizards people are starting to get into nowadays as far as pets. This is a blue and white Argentina tegu. She's pretty much full grown. Of course, their nails, they're very sharp to help them climb. They do have a powerful bite if they were to bite. And they have this massive tail, which when they feel threatened, you can see her trying to whip me with it. That's a defense for her. The larger ones can make a nice impact on you if they do whip you with their tail. Okay, now we're going to go look at another lizard that was very popular in the late 80s and early 90s called the green iguana. And you'll see why they've no longer as popular as they used to be. They used to be popular in the late 80s and early 90s because babies were very small and relatively inexpensive. But as people started getting them and they grow, people didn't know what to do with them because you can see how big they get. They can get up to 6 to 7 feet long. And they require a lot of attention as far as special bulbs, UVB bulb. For the most part, like any other large lizards, the things you have to be worried about, again, bites. They're large claws which help them climb, and they have very long, slender tails which act like a whip. Pet shops and breeders have nowadays kind of stopped breeding them as often, especially regular green iguanas. They do have blue, red, and albinos, but they're very expensive. So the thought is, since they're very expensive, only people that are going to buy them or take care of them until for the life of the animal. This here is Melee. It's an Asian water monitor. He's about 3 to 4 years old, so you can see about how long he is. He's probably close to 5 feet long now. But again, with any large lizard, the thing you have to be worried about are their claws, a tail whip, and of course his mouth. Some signs of aggression you might see with these guys are hissing. He will puff up, maybe show you his mouth, show you how big he is. But you can see what he's doing with his tongue, just like all lizards. He's smelling. He's, as you can see, he likes to climb too, because he's climbing up me like a tree. But This is what they look like when they're about 3 or 4 years old, and that's what they look like full grown. That one there weighs about 80 pounds. They have the potential of getting over 100 pounds, and he's about 7 feet long, the max around 8 feet total length. Now, some proper ways of handling these guys, you want to make sure you have a good grip of their base of their tail, because you want to control that whipping as best you can, and you want to hold right in here under their forearms to help support their body. Now, like I said, ones that are docile or tame, if you crate them up against your body kind of like an infant, they feel secure and they'll settle down for you very easily. But ones that you don't know of, as long as you grab a hold of their tail and behind their head or their forearms, you'll avoid the tail whip and the bite. Ways to transport these larger lizards, if you have to remove them from a house for whatever reason, find a bin. They can put them in a bin and put a lid on top of it, like so, and secure it. Give it back to the owner. If there's no owner on site or the owner cannot take control of it, we need to contact animal control and they'll help take care of the animals on scene for us. Thanks for watching this edition of The Wild Side. Next month we're going to talk about some amphibians and maybe some dangerous reptiles that you may come across. If you have any more questions, feel free to call me at Company 6 on B shift, or my email address is rhoylman@bbgov.com. Take it away, Alex.
Up next, Resource Management has seen quite a recurrence of flooded chainsaws turned in for repair. In this month's SCBA checklist, Dave Stites brings us a much-needed refresher on how to properly start and maintain our Stihl chainsaws.
I've been getting a lot of chainsaws in recently with saw will not start on the repair tag. I can usually start most of these saws in 1 to 3 pulls without doing any more than putting the saw on high idle with the choke off and tugging at the pull cord. I can get these saws started so easily, mainly because they are only flooded. Now let's go over the proper starting procedure for a Stihl chainsaw. To reduce the risk of fire and burn injuries, start the engine at least 10 feet from the fueling spot, outdoors only. To reduce the risk of injury, the chain brake must be engaged when starting the saw. Do not drop start the saw. This method is very dangerous because you may lose control of the saw. There are 2 recommended methods for starting your chainsaw. With both methods, the choke setting is used for starting a cold saw, where the high idle position is used for starting a warm saw. With the first recommended method, the chainsaw is started on the ground, chain brake engaged. Grip the front handlebar with your left hand and press down. Place the toe of your right boot in the right handle and press down. With your right hand, pull out the starter rope until you feel a definite resistance, and then give it a brisk, strong pull, stopping before you reach the end of the rope's length so you don't yank the rope out. With the second recommended method, the chain brake is engaged, the front of the chainsaw is firmly gripped with your left hand, and you keep your arm in a locked, straight position. Hold the rear of the saw tightly between your legs, just above the knees. With your right hand, pull out the starter rope until you feel a definite resistance, then give it a brisk, strong pull, stopping before you reach the end of the rope's length so you don't yank the rope out. In both starting procedures, you set the choke and pull the starter cord until the saw rumbles or attempts to start, then take the choke off and pull the starter cord again until the saw starts in high idle, then quickly blip the throttle to take the saw off high idle or you will damage the clutches. Do not pull the chainsaw more than 3 times on choke or you will flood the engine. If you flood the engine, let the saw sit for an hour or so and start it on high idle only, no choke. Or take the spark plug out and dry it off and start it on high idle, no choke. You may have to pull the starter cord 10 or 15 times on high idle to get that flooded saw started, but it's better than placing it out of service for 2 weeks or more. Once you get your flooded saw started on high idle, blip the throttle to return to low idle. Quickly remove the chain brake and grab a handful of throttle again to clear out all of that fuel from the cylinder. Hold the throttle trigger wide open with the saw in a safe position for 30 seconds or so until all the excess fuel has been expelled from the cylinder and the saw will idle normally again and you can apply the chain brake. Under normal checkoff procedures, once the saw has started for you, take the chain brake off, rev it up a few times, reset the chain brake, and shut the saw off. Do not let it sit on the apron and idle. These chainsaws are two-cycle, air-cooled engines. They are cooled by fuel and the air that comes off the flywheel. If you let them sit on the apron and idle, they will eventually overheat and score the cylinder and piston, eventually damaging a $700 saw. I can see no valid reason to let them idle on the apron for 5 minutes. In my opinion, it's a waste of fuel, but more importantly, you are damaging a saw you will someday need to depend on while standing atop a roof somewhere. Thank you for your attention.
Well, that just about wraps up this month's edition of Virginia Beach Frontline Firefighter. We'd like to hear from you. For comments or suggestions on what you would like to see on future programs, email Kirk Kellerhalls at the address on the screen below. And don't forget to follow us on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. From the 2013 9/11 Heroes Run here at the beautiful Virginia Beach Sportsplex, I'm your host, Howie, thanking you on behalf of all the entire Frontline staff for watching. Stay safe out there, everyone, and remember, motivation is a requirement for success, not failure. Hope to see you next time.